It's time once again for another episode of the Buckhead Business Show. Being brought to you by the Buckhead Business Association. Broadcasting live from the Pro Business Channel studios in Atlanta. And now, here's your host for today's episode.
We got two for the price of one here today.
We do. We're right here overlooking that billion-dollar view with Rich Casanova and Michael Moore, and the Buckhead Business Show is here for serving you today. We got some great guests, and boy, I think that it's important to understand that we can run a business even once we've run one before, and we've got Dan in the studio with us today.
Dan King.
Man, Dan King. So we are here
Not
for
just
the
Dan, but Dan the King.
That we are here for the King today, and he's going to talk to us about the continuity of process of running your business the correct way with some. What's the name of this company? Closer Reach
Consulting.
Yes, consulting.
Yeah.
So he's out there helping people do the right things at the right time, hopefully for the right reasons. So, Rich, get him in.
Yeah, Dan, talk to us a little bit about your background as an advisor to senior executives, boards in the areas of business transformation and growth. You've helped business leaders get it right. I like that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds, right?
Partially right.
So tell us a little bit about your background before we kind of jump into the conversation, the topic at hand.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Great to be here. Close reach. So it's a nautical term, and it's the setting of the sails for optimum speed. So that struck me as a reasonable name for a business that wants to help business leaders grow companies. And, like so many others in business, I started out in larger companies, Fortune 50 primarily, and, it was all about chasing the money and the title. And I spent, more than a couple decades in that quest and found myself having a challenging, what I call commute conversation. And I would advise your listeners that, when you leave the workplace at the end of the day, think about the conversation in your brain. What's going through your mind? What was the day like? And if it's not overwhelmingly positive and exciting in terms of what you're doing and how you're contributing, question if you should be there.
Before we jump into that part of the conversation, I found interesting in your bio that you were also, in addition to working with those Fortune 50 companies, you also were recently a venture-backed consumer services company recognized by Inc. magazine, one of the fastest-growing companies, 5 out of 7 years.
Yes, that was a great run, and it was interesting. The quest, how I arrived there was a bit of an epiphany. There was an illuminating event that occurred when I was with the last big company, and when I was having that commute conversation I mentioned. I wanted to make a change. Something had to happen, and something clicked. I was in an environment where growth was achieved through cost-cutting and typically unimaginative efforts, raising prices, not so much caring about the customer. And I found that culture to be uninspiring. And the high-growth company you alluded to, Rich, was an opportunity. I took a risk. I had just gotten off an airplane. I had a trip to Mexico City and had the unfortunate job of closing an office there with this large company I referred to. And I had to sit in a conference room and tell 23 people their jobs are over.
Wow.
And that's when it occurred to me. That's when the epiphany struck in terms of it didn't have to be this way. And I understand in business sometimes jobs are lost, and that's part of the game. But in this case, it wasn't the people's fault. It was poor management. It was some poor decisions. And I took a risk. I made a leap into this fledgling $12 million business that you mentioned, venture-backed, still borrowing money, in all respects a troubled company. Yet I believed that with the right team, the right strategy, the right technology, we could turn it around. And we built a good team. We installed the right strategy, and we did turn it around. And we grew it from 12 million to 100 million, and we created jobs. So that defined my mission. Leaving that business after 10 years of great growth, I wanted to replicate what we did and help other business leaders who really had an appetite for growth to get it right, to figure out what does it take so I can add to the employment, not reduce, and create an environment where people thrive.
Well, that's as you go through the process of trying to identify the talent and the leaders and align the group. I know you're big into the alignment arena, so you've got to use some sixth sense as you work with companies. So talk a little bit about how you make that engagement work best for not only the talent in the company, but the people who you're trying to train to be more talented in the company.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Actually, I'll use the D word. I'm a bit discriminatory with who I work with. I can't be.
It's better for your health and your stress.
Yeah. It's hard to be effective if leaders are okay with average. So I determine pretty quickly if a business leader is interested in being exceptional to driving a business beyond mediocre, and those become good clients for me. And the work really revolves around the big three: strategy, execution, and talent. And getting those three things correct year after year is what sets the great companies apart from the average.
Well, as you said, as you pick your clients, where do you see the strength of the companies today looking at the strategy? I mean, are they spending hours and hours at the whiteboard? Are they really looking at their culture versus what the people need? Are they taking it from within? How do people build a good strategy today to become worthy of being your client?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a bit across the board, but I think the best practice and what I've seen in terms of really extraordinary process is don't overplan. You need a vision. I would really advise against the 5-year view. That, to me, in our world, it's a little extensive and hard to pin down. But we spend a little bit of time on a 3-year view, and that's the inspiring piece. We want people in the organization to understand the mission, where we're headed as an organization, and to be inspired. And that comes with that 3-year vision. So we plant the seed there and then back up and develop a very tactical 12-year set of initiatives.
12-year?
Excuse me.
12 months. Yeah. I love that. I didn't mean to catch you in that one. I'm going, wow, he doesn't like 5 years, he does 3 years, and suddenly he backs up and does 12 years.
Some of my clients, it's 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Right, exactly.
That is one of the things as we test and measure, because there's a bunch of sayings about test and measuring, but when you're looking at 3 years of a plan, that's pretty good. But when you're looking at 1-year results, talk about some of the things you're seeing in the marketplace today, because we've had how many years? Going on 7 years of success in our marketplace, or no, actually 9 years, according to some. If you believe 2008 was really a crash and it finished in early 2009, we're at 7, 8, going on almost 9 years of inclining business results, and we've gotten back most of the things we lost. So what are you seeing in the marketplace as you select clients and begin to work with them on those 1, 2, and 3 year measures of their goals?
Well, the macroeconomic conditions certainly are a plus right now. However, the companies that really can achieve the double-digit growth year after year and put themselves in the elite category aren't sitting still. I worked with a client 2 years ago, a software business doing very well, great growth, and the CEO happened to be a lady who was ready to take either the company public or do a strategic sale. And I sat in her management team meeting after the conclusion of a terrific 12 months, and her message to her team was, listen, the board is extremely happy with our progress and our results. If we can have one more year like the year we just had, we're going to have a great event. We're all going to do really well. And I circled back to 2 or 3 of her senior leaders after that meeting. I said, what did you hear? And invariably what I was hearing from her team was like, let's not mess this up, which they meant let's not change. Let's not take any risk. And sure enough, that next year came around. They were in a high-paced environment, very competitive. They struggled and had a very challenging year. So status quo, I've found in my work with growth companies is the enemy of growth.
The pack ran off and left them, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
You recently released a white paper. Talk to us about that as far as the organizational talent pipeline and how that differs versus normal recruiting, if you will.
Yeah, I found this, Rich, to be a very provocative topic and something companies are slowly beginning to embrace, and that is linking strategy with their talent quotient. And typically in companies, there's a significant lag. So if you can imagine, a business plans out their next 12-month strategy, and in a growth business, those initiatives are likely to be different than what they did the prior year, just by definition. However, they don't challenge the org chart. So over time, this problem worsens, and it's as though we now are expecting the same talent, the same people to do very different things. And that's this lag, right? So until companies start to suffer from an execution standpoint, they tend not to address the talent challenge. And the fact that talent in most companies is relegated into a department, buried in human resources, speaks to the fact that it's not necessarily a core capability of the business. So what I've advocated for, and in my white paper I talk about a talent alignment system where you take the talent management capability of a business, extract it from the department, and make it an enterprise-wide capability, actually reporting to a CEO. Why wouldn't talent rise to that level? We measure finance, a CFO reports to the CEO, a chief marketing officer typically reports to the CEO. Why would whoever leads talent not report to the chief executive?
Right.
Makes great sense. Now, Danny, you've got a whole theory built around talent alignment, and you actually implement that in the firms and as part of your engagement. So, talk a little bit about some of the tools and things you've learned in the last 5 years as we've continued to grow. And I think you've been in this. Your consulting firm is technically about 5 years old or so. So, give us your 5-year track record.
Well, thank you. I've been fortunate. I've found that. My discriminatory test in terms of business leaders that I can effectively help has worked well. And there are leaders, searching for answers. My approach is I'm an advisor. I'm in a sounding board. I try to equip businesses with the capabilities so they're not relying on me over time. There's incredible potential that has not yet been unleashed in companies. And there's this concept that's becoming a little more well-known now called the inversion of influence. And it's tapping into the middle of the business. Rather than business leaders and senior teams believing they have to have all the answers and all the ideas, all the decisions are going to come top down, there's an incredible, really expansion of this idea of tapping into mid-management and empowering them to make decisions and figure things out. And when that starts to happen, the momentum is amazing, and the time it takes to solve a problem and execute really is compressed dramatically.
Well, I know this is going to spur some great conversation with our next guest. Anxiously waiting in the studio, been taking some notes. Speaking of talent, as has a few years in the NFL on the professional arena in sports, but also pivoting in consulting and business. But before we segue here, Dan, how would folks reach out to you? What's a good point of contact or website?
Website is closereachconsulting.com. And email dking@closereachconsulting.
And we do want to introduce our next guest. Michael, can we allow some time at the end for these two guys to talk? Because I think there's going to be some interesting cross-conversation here. Yeah.
Now, our next guest has had some fun because he's actually already started an academy. He started a university, all in his part-time after being a football superstar. Right. And he is a ring knocker today. So we're hearing the Super Bowl of a ring here get tapped on the table, and he's got a proud story. Nice. I'll tell you what, even after being a football guy and then running for a little bit of public office, trying to do service, he's actually reaching out now and providing I love this, mental toughness university. Matter of fact, he's got an events coming up here in the city, and he now lives in our city after coming from a little colder environment, a little further away. I think Idaho, that's far away, isn't it?
I'd say so. Yeah,
way on
unless
out
it's Idaho, Georgia, because we do have a lot of.
I know we got
Paris and
Dallas,
Athens.
the Paris, but we don't know about the Idaho. I've never seen that. But Jimmy Ferris is one of those guys who he's in this millennium because he started his professional ball career in the new 21st century. So share with us a little bit about how in the earth you got from Idaho all the way to professional football and what kind of things you're looking to do here in our city.
And why isn't that ring with the Falcons when you played with the Falcons?
I would love.
You take your rings when you get them, sport.
You do. I won this ring my rookie year, and I think I was naive enough to think that it was just that easy, and maybe I'd do it 2 or 3 more times, right?
Exactly.
And got close with the Falcons. In 2004, we went to the NFC Championship game, lost to the Eagles, who ended up losing to the Patriots. So
Can we edit that part out? Can you edit that part out? Yeah.
That will be an edit there on that one.
The Falcons just came up short on the score. They didn't really lose.
No, well, I'm saying the Eagles in that year lost also to the Patriots. Obviously my chance to win a ring with the Falcons is past, but hopefully, I think.
Sure. I mean, you look young enough. We could throw you back in.
Several people have said that, and
Yeah.
I just say, well, come watch me do a couple sprints out on the track, and you'll know that I'm no longer in that kind of shape.
Pass that 40 yards.
Jimmy, perhaps you didn't understand. We don't use the P word here in Atlanta.
I understand.
So,
I was very torn. I was watching the Super Bowl down at Big Sky here in Buckhead, and had a lot of people at 28-3 that were in my face telling me it was over, and I just kept saying Tom Brady, Tom Brady, Tom Brady, and
never underestimate.
And obviously I don't want to talk about that all day, but here's the deal. People talk about what did the Falcons do wrong? What happened? They just collapsed. No, they got beat by the best player ever to play his position ever in the history of football, period. And you can go back and second guess in hindsight every decision that the Falcons made along the way. Tom Brady is the best to ever do it. Bill Belichick is the best to ever do it, and that's what happened, period.
So now you heard it from the Comcast sportscaster. Here he is, folks. He just shared it all.
But that's it.
But that segues into the universal conversation both of y'all are having. It's about leadership. It's about
talent,
right?
So it's funny when Dan was talking. He talked about kind of the way he's starting to approach. I think he talked about like mid-level management, right? And so what we start talking about are teams. And what I've found in corporations is, and a lot of the leaders that come to us that want our services is, team building. I don't know if it's a new concept within corporations, but you just hear it all the time. Leaders talking about my team, and we're trying to, build this part of a team and that aspect of a team. You've got a lot of leaders, and Dan, you may find that you found this as well. That there's a lot of leaders building teams that have never really been a part of a team, and they've never been led by people who have built great teams. Right. And part of the reason why I wanted to transition into this field is because I have been so fortunate to have been coached and led and trained by some of the best leaders and team builders that have ever been a part of pro sports or a corporate environment. And I think that the power of that type of leadership that knows how to build a successful team, that knows how to cultivate talent amongst their players or their people is invaluable.
And at that level, I mean, we mentioned the Patriots and Falcons, but you're also involved briefly with the 49ers, the Redskins, and the Jaguars. So if you're at that level of leadership, talent, that organization that's so fine-tuned and structured.
Yes.
I mean, very few people have that takeaway of that experience.
So one of the things that I find in a lot of the corporations that we work with is just a gross misunderstanding of the importance of, for lack of a better expression, taking care of your people, right? There are corporations that do things like, cut coffee out of the break room in cost cutting measures, right? When at the end of the day, most leaders will understand that your people really are your business. And
Absolutely.
Pro sports organizations have figured out that if you can provide your people with everything that they could possibly want or need to be successful, you create an environment where they come to work focused on one thing, and that's how they can do their job to the best possible ability that they can do it. And they don't worry about, we have school teachers that are buying their own supplies. We have people that work in corporate America, billion-dollar companies that are coming to work rushing to work through traffic without getting breakfast or any food to eat. I mean, provide these people with a small a small breakfast or a continental type breakfast or some coffee in the break room, just simple things to make their job easier.
And kind of a dumb question, but what I think I've seen a lot of organizations do is they provide these benefits, but don't really inquire amongst the talent or their team what really drives them, what motivates them. Because for one person, it's a different reward, right?
So one of the things that we have found that's been very, very insightful for us is just to kind of walk you through the process. So the Mental Toughness University is actually founded by a guy that also lives here in Atlanta named Steve Siebold. Been in the business for 25 years in corporate keynote speaking consulting. I partnered with Steve several years ago, bringing kind of my football and pro sports background to the company. And one of the things that we do that I feel like sets us apart a little bit is very in-depth surveys. So if we book a deal with a particular company, we will spend 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks, surveying their people, interviewing the senior leaders to find out through anonymous surveys some of those pain points that typically you don't get through a conversation or a meeting with one of your senior leaders or upper level management. You'd be shocked at what people will disclose in an anonymous survey, and we find out things like what you said, the problems that they're dealing with, what motivates them, what drives them, how they really feel about the management, how they feel the company really feels about them, do they value them, all these sorts of things. And so then we can go in with a very tailored, very specific program to deal with exactly what those individuals are dealing with.
And that's 4 to 6 weeks, not 12 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a 12-year plan. We do have a 12-year plan.
So before we jump into the conversation amongst with you and Dan, talk to us, give us a synopsis of the university and the academy, and also the event, what people might expect, some of their takeaways, what's your goal, because obviously that's a big part of the messaging and the objective, right?
Yeah. So the Mental Toughness University is a psychological performance training for corporations, individuals. We have programs that, like I said, that we take into companies like Wells Fargo, Johnson & Johnson, GlaxoSmithKline, some of the big Fortune 500s. We have programs in Mental Toughness University to service individuals. What I've done with the Goal Mettle Academy is I created a program, essentially a goal-setting program. Kind of took a word play off of gold medal and used that word mettle, METTLE, which is persistence, perseverance, passion towards accomplishing a goal. So the objective of the academy is to teach people how to effectively set goals, put a plan in place, and work daily to achieve them. I feel like goal setting is one of those more elementary type topics that people, when you bring it up, people just kind of say, "Oh yeah, I've been there, done that. I know all about goal setting."
I've written on.
I read the book.
And what I always ask is, I think the real telltale, and Dan would probably agree with this from a business standpoint, is your results always tell the story. So when people tell me they know all about goal setting, how's
that working out for you?
Not to be rude, I just say, well, if you know this stuff so well, why aren't you getting better results? If you're so in tune with this stuff, why are you still broke? If you know all of these strategies and all of these secrets, why are you still struggling? Why aren't you getting your goals? And that's the word. What I find right there is that there's a lot of people who might have something in mind that they call a goal, but they've never executed a strategy to actually achieve it. And that's what I'm going to teach people that come to the event on Thursday.
You're both for the world of actually measuring, testing, studying, scheduling. Dan, I know that when you talk about talent and same way with you, Jimmy, talent in the marketplace is the important part. You can then meld to the goal. If you don't have a talent and you don't have a strategy, then it doesn't matter what else you're doing. You can be going in any direction. So talk a little bit
Dan,
about
yes
that.
or yes?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just listening to Jimmy, and this is so profoundly accurate in terms of, businesses can't win unless people win.
Yeah.
And, people by and large are only going to win if the business invests in them and helps them win, gives them the tools to grow and thrive, the survey, I love to hear that. Data, there's so much data out there as it relates to attitudes and culture. And, many leaders, they're a little mistaken in that they don't think you can measure some of these things. And you can. I talked earlier about this, what I call the commute conversation. And I'll ask CEOs, one of my first discussions with a client would be, what do your people thinking and saying to themselves when they leave here at the end of a day.
That's right.
And you can measure that.
That's what we find out in surveys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if they honestly and
Yeah.
anonymously answer that question
They-
and you synthesize that data, which is really one of the challenges we have today, because people will still lie to you about what's going on in their mind and their life until you do it maybe anonymously, but you have to have a methodology that you can show them the result of what they're thinking and how it's impacting the company. Most, as you said, CEOs are going around doing their own thing, and as you said earlier, Jimmy, they maybe haven't ever led in a team. They've always been a semi-lone wolf approach to getting something done and saying, "Oh, I did my goal. Why didn't you do yours?"
One of the things that's interesting about the concept of a team to me is I wholeheartedly reject the idea that there's no I in team. I think that's one of those cliches that sounds great in theory, but
there is a me, though.
But
there is a me.
Absolutely, and let me tell you what, the best teams are made up of a bunch of bad individuals.
Performers.
Right? They're
performers.
made up of a bunch of people that are striving to be the very best that they can be to serve their own purposes within the context of the greater good. And you take a team full of guys that want to be the very best at what they do, men and women that want to succeed at the very highest level, and you put them together and you get a team result that wins championships, that breaks records, that wins President's Awards, that is really successful in the marketplace.
Top 5%.
Well, and just to expand on the sports analogy, you think it's execution, right? So teams prepare. You think about the Patriots, the Falcons, some of the premier NFL teams. Preparations. The game plan, they study, they got the playbook, but when they get on the field, they make it happen. And it's no different in business. And, strategy planning, there's a lot of preparation. I mentioned earlier, there are senior teams that would love to just plan all day long. But at some point, you got to go to work. You got to roll up your sleeves. You need to get in the trenches and make it happen. And that's when it comes down to the individual and the capabilities and the teamwork and the unity. And, it's the follow through on this survey. I was working with a client recently, a $14 billion construction materials business. And they had one of the preeminent consulting firms come in. We all know the M word. And they charge them a lot of money to do what they called an organizational health index. So they had all this data, Jimmy. They had reams of information of what employees thought about their management, the business, the future, the vision, et cetera. And I'm sitting with the CEO. He has all of this information. And I said, well, is the consulting firm going to help you?
No.
What are you going to do with it? Right?
They said they don't do that. So
how would validate that result?
Here's a senior executive with incredible wealth of information around his people in the organization, and he wasn't sure what to do, how to follow through, how to execute. So we mapped a plan, and it's fairly straightforward if you've been there and done that. And people now are getting feedback. They're starting to understand that some things are actually going to change for the better, and it's mind-bending.
So Dan's talking about two things also that I think are relevant to what we've talked about in terms of the goal-setting aspect, right? So there's a lot of how-tos out there. There's a lot of books on goal-setting, how to improve performance, but where they fall off is in the actual execution or application of that. And that happens in business, that happens in our personal lives, that happens in the people that set New Year's goals. The statistics, the new statistics are that 92% of people that set New Year's resolutions fail.
They're gone.
And they're gone in 2 weeks maybe. Yeah. And so when you talk about just on a very simple level of, you can take a big corporation and you take those individual members of those teams. You teach those individual members how to set personal and professional goals. And then you teach them a few simple strategies like the simple stuff, writing them down, putting a plan in place. Only 3% of the population has written goals. Would you believe that?
Well,
3%.
We've seen it all the way from Harvard on down. So, Jimmy, you've got some real stuff coming up just this week that you're going to be helping people to set down, measure, record. So give us a little bit of rundown of the extra information about your event we probably need to know.
Yeah, Gold Mettle Academy. The first event is happening Thursday at 6:30 p.m. at the Atlanta Marriott at Perimeter Place, just right over here off of 285 in Ashford Dunwoody. Essentially, it's a 2-hour event. I tried to book it late enough so that people could leave work and get through some of the traffic, maybe grab a bite to eat.
6 to 8 p.m., right?
Yeah, 6:30 to 8:30. Yep, we'll have some coffee and water in the back for those caffeine heads like myself.
Right.
And I'm going to spend about an hour talking about the science and psychology of goal setting, dispelling some of the myths about goal setting and why a lot of the things you've been taught about setting goals are wrong. And then the last hour is going to be that actual execution implementation part where I'm going to take you through the process, and you're going to leave with a set of goals, a plan in place that you can start on the very next morning, on Friday morning, to start working towards it.
Now, if we missed this one, you've got some others planned, I'm sure. But what's the website we found them at?
The best place to get the Gold Medal Academy information is jimmyferris.com, JIMMYFARRIS. And on the corporate side, the Mental Toughness University, it's mentaltoughness.com. We have lots of events coming up with Mental Toughness U. Always looking to service more. So contact me on either one.
Just jump out to jimmyferris.com and you're in business and listen for the ring knock. And I'll tell you what, we're going to bring some real performance into the marketplace. Sounds like you and Dan are going to start this process to keep up with each other. Measure each other's goals, successes, strategy. 1 year, 3 years, partners. 5 years, 12 years. I don't know what it's going to be.
We've got some things to talk about.
Yeah,
right.
Very well. Well, it's good to have you with us this morning.
And for Dan, you can find Dan at closereachconsulting.com.
Excellent.
Right?
That's it.
All right. Man, I think we could go on another hour or so here, right?
Well, I think we're going to get down to that strategy and look for the goal setting as well as the record keeping, which is really the key thing. What gets measured gets improved. That's why we have scores in ball games, right?
That's right.
Otherwise, it's just a hobby.
That's right.
And our goal is to wrap this up in 30 minutes, and we did that, yeah.
We did that. So the Buckhead Business Association, again, has brought you some great news, great information. And, of course, we do our monthly meetings, our weekly meetings, every month. And we do our after hours, which is coming up, Rich. And, boy, we've got everything going on. Thank goodness we're training young leaders here in Buckhead to pay attention to the P's and the Q's and the team building that's very necessary. So for another week, we're going to wrap it up and see you next week, same time, same station. And somewhere out there's a wrap.
Thank you for joining us and our guests on the Pro Business Channel. Use the social media links here to share today's show and stay tuned for the next episode of the Buckhead Business Show. Brought to you by the Buckhead Business Association.